Welcome to Rebecca Sounds Reveille. I am so delighted to talk to you tonight about something that I'm very passionate about, and that is politics and elections, candidacy. And as you know, I speak very strongly about all of us who really need to get involved. And that means learning about your candidates, even getting involved in helping with campaigns, getting involved with city council, board of supervisors, precincts, anything that you can do close to home, the better, because you have a lot more leverage that way than you know. Many people really will only come out to vote when it comes time for a major election, such as the presidency. But it's really important to get involved in between and learning about what's going on in our own community. That's where we really affect change. And today I have someone with me that is going to talk to you about a passion that they have. And a lot of times, many of us have a passion inside of us that starts at a very young age, and a lot of us will go into the military. With me tonight, my guest is a retired Army First Sergeant and Counterintelligence Special Agent. And with me is CJ Grisham. Welcome to the show, CJ.
Thanks for having me, Rebecca.
You're welcome. You have a very phenomenal background. You have spent most of your life in Texas. You have traveled the world as a Navy dependent, so you have both the knowledge of being on one side of the military as well as being involved. And you are a sixth-generation Texan. You have just some really phenomenal background specialties that you have, we'll talk about here on the show. But in addition to that, you are also taking your leadership skills from the military and putting them to use in a passion that you have, and we're going to talk about that here shortly as well, all while being a God-fearing family man with conservative values. You have a voice of activism with that. And in addition to all of these qualities and things that you are doing in your life, you're getting ready to graduate from Texas A&M. We're going to talk about that as well. And what you're running for is State Representative House 55 in Texas. And I'm super excited to talk to you about this. So again, welcome.
Thanks again. Thanks again for having me.
So let me just ask you, you're a war veteran. How did you start out going into the military, going into the Army?
Well, it's a funny story. My sister was supposed to go into the Army, and at the last minute, she backed out and decided she wanted to go into the Marine Corps. You'd like that. And she felt really, she felt really bad that she had kind of jilted the Army recruiter. And so he's like, well, hey, do you know anyone else that'll go into the Army or that's interested? And she said, well, why don't you call my brother? I was a long-haired punk rock kid. I had no interest in going into the Army. I mean, I did the ROTC thing in high school, but I was a DJ, and I went to concerts, and I didn't want that to ruin my life. But the recruiter called me, told him I wasn't interested, and he's like, well, we can offer you all this stuff. And I said, okay, well, I'll talk to you, but you got to come to me. And so I took their little the ASVAB test. Apparently I did really good at it. I wanted to be an MP, but I was too short at the time.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And so I said, well, no, there's nothing I want to do. And he says, well, we got one more test for you. And this was the language test. And so I took the language test, and they said, you've got the pick of the litter, whatever you want to do. And so I said, okay, I want to be a linguist. And so I joined up well, I ended up being a Spanish linguist. They choose the language for you. I didn't realize that. I wanted to be a Japanese linguist.
Interesting.
Spent the first 5 years of my career in South America, tracking narco terrorists and human traffickers from South and Central America up to the United States. And after the USS Cole bombing, I decided I wanted to change careers and go into counterintelligence so I could track down terrorists. And that's what I did for the final 15 years. So I like to say I got in. I was only going to do one term. When I joined the Army, I actually had purple hair when I joined the Army. And so I thought I'd do one term and get out, and I just kept forgetting to get out.
Just kept forgetting. I absolutely love it. You know, when you have a passion for something, it's easy to forget how much time just kind of travels on and you're just doing your thing. But
Yeah.
I want to thank you so much for your service, because your commitment shows so much about your character and your love for our country. And that has carried over into what you're doing now. And you have done some incredible things. I definitely do not want to minimize them at all, because they are astounding, and you are very profound in the things that you do and want to accomplish. And I think that your passion is something that many people wish they had, or maybe it just hasn't quite come out. When it comes to politics, there's something really important that plays a role in moving forward, and you know this, and that's leadership. And without the right skills and the understanding of what really goes on within our country, it's very difficult to be an effective leader, especially when it comes to such a broad and diverse type of, I don't want to say rules so much, but guidelines that we have as a nation.
Yeah.
So you understand what I'm talking about. So talk to me how this transition happened for you.
Well, it's a really weird path that I took. When I came back from Iraq, I was in Iraq for the main assault into the country in 2003. And so I fought my way across the border all the way up to Baghdad. And then we had to fight our way. We were supposed to come home after Baghdad fell. And literally 2 days before we were supposed to ship back down to Kuwait, we were told, no, you're going to Fallujah. And so it was a rough 9 months of straight combat. It seemed very little downtime for my team because we were always out there gathering intel. And so when I got home, there was something that was wrong and something that was different. And I noticed, the first time I noticed that was when I was at a Subway shop, and this guy in front of me asked the sandwich maker to cut his sandwich into quarters. And he ended instead, or in thirds, I'm sorry, but instead he made 3 cuts, which cut it into quarters instead of thirds. And this guy just blew a gasket and was yelling at this kid, very angry. He wasn't like a recent combat vet or anything, but I realized at that point that, man, this is what society is complaining about, is how their sandwich is being cut. And here I am. I didn't come home with some friends, and I almost didn't come home myself. And this guy's worried about his sandwich. And then there were some other things that were kind of bubbling up. But, back then, I was a sergeant first class when I got back from Iraq. And you don't talk about, the things going on, the memories, the dreams, and all that kind of stuff, because back then you had to be hard. If you were a first sergeant, you didn't have depression, you didn't have anxiety, you were gung-ho, you got to be hard. And so I started writing a blog. And I like to say that the reason I wrote the blog was so I could talk to somebody without really talking to anybody. I could just get my thoughts down. And the blog ended up becoming very popular because I was very open about everything in combat, and it was raw. And I was trying to tell the story from a soldier's perspective, which was the name of the blog, is a soldier's perspective. And that's what kind of got me on this role. And then, of course, I came home and there were all these anti-war protests, and that got me involved in going to those and sort of standing up for my brothers and sisters. And then as I moved around, I got involved in my kids' education when the school board was trying to do something the parents didn't want them to do. I was able to use my leadership skills to organize everybody and oppose this policy, which put me into the spotlight locally there. And it always seems like there's been something that's thrust me into and prepared me for the next stage in my life. And just like when I got back to Texas to retire, it was an unfortunate arrest that sort of catapulted me again into an activist role. And so that's sort of my progression right there.
Well, there's some things that are really crucial about your background and experience that are going to really play a huge role in the election currently. One of the major issues that is going on nationally, and being in Texas, I'm sure that this is going to be an issue as well, and that is the whole uh, illegal immigration, border security, so on and so forth. And this is something that you mentioned um, as you were speaking, and that is that you had to deal with that when you were in Iraq. And you're a decorated war veteran, both for Iraq and Afghanistan. And you know the issues when it comes to different countries and borders and what the repercussions can be if they're not addressed. And then to take it one step further, we're talking now about on our home front.
Mm-hmm.
So can you share a little bit about how this all kind of is pertinent to what is currently going on with the election that you are addressing?
You know, if you take a look at the Middle East or the Persian Gulf area, they've got a history of conflict, and a lot of times that conflict comes about because the borders are so fluid over there, and they constantly change, and they only recently comprise the current borders that we have. But even now that you've got a nationality, which, you know, you've got Kurds and Sunni and Shia, and these sort of bubbles within boundaries that expand beyond the current borders. And the fact that there are people who are so fluid that come into places throughout history, you can look at this, that when you have these open borders where anybody can come in, they start to affect the culture and the landscape. And a lot of times that's not very positive.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't do that, if we don't protect our borders from these people who are trying to kill us, we are going to be killed. And it only took 19 people to kill almost 3,000 on 9/11. And
Right.
these little things are happening, and they're trying to happen even more. You've got the Boston Marathon bombing. You've got the thing up in
Yes.
Garland. And so, you've got these drunken drivers who are here illegally, or you've got these murderers who are here illegally. And if we don't stop at the border and we don't do something about that, we're putting our own lives in danger. You know, everyone wants to talk about dreamers and kids, and no one wants to talk about the threat. And it's funny because the same people that are right now yelling about gun rights and, oh, if we can just save one life, are the same people that want open borders to allow these people to come in. That's jeopardizing our lives. And
So,
yeah,
real quick, let me jump in here, because being a devil's advocate, and I have the same viewpoint that you do, but being the devil's advocate, people will say something to the effect of, well, our nation is founded on immigration. Most of us here have heritage, lineage that comes from other countries. And my point on that is very true. But we're here because this is a free nation, and we want to maintain that. We're here for safety. This is a safe nation. We're not considered a third world country. We're here with freedoms and rights and protections, and we have a better healthcare system than most countries around the world. And how do you maintain that? Well, if it was just a free for all, there would be a lot of things going on in our nation that are going on in other countries, and
right.
it can't be that way if we want to maintain our current lifestyle.
And my response to that is kind of twofold. First of all, back when our country was founded, people came here because they wanted to assimilate to American culture. They wanted the freedoms. They wanted to be able to buy land and to make their own way. They didn't really want to be taken care of. They wanted a job. They wanted to work. They wanted to raise a family. And they wanted to be Americans. And they maintained their culture because you had the Germans and the Irish, and they were able to maintain
Right.
their culture, but they also were Americans. The moment they stepped off that ship, they were kissing the ground, glad that they were Americans. And they were Irish, but they were Americans and they were English or Brit, whatever, Germans, Dutch, but they were Americans. So that's the
Mm-hmm.
first thing, is we don't have that assimilation right now. I drive around here in Bell County, and it drives me nuts when I see people flying huge Mexican flags off their trucks, but not an American flag. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you wouldn't have seen that back then. I don't, you know, I don't think that would have been the case, because they were glad to be an American. Now, if they want to fly an American and a Mexican flag, I get it, because you should love America. Now, the second thing is 2018 is not 1600. It's not 1700. And what I mean by
Yes.
that is, we're no longer building a country. We have a country. This is our country. We don't necessarily need immigrants like we needed immigrants before, because we were building a country, we were establishing freedom,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't need to do that anymore. So we should be very selective now that we're established. You know, our population has grown. We don't need to be self-sustaining by growing in and bringing in immigrants. So we need to be very selective. We need to make sure that our culture is protected, and the people that come in here, they're going to swear a duty to this country, that they're coming here to assimilate. Our language is English. They should come here to speak English. And even if you can't speak English, that should be the first thing they do. You know, these people that came over here from the Czechoslovakia and all these other countries, they learned English quickly because that was the language of success, and that's still the language of success.
Mm-hmm.
So those are my two answers to the whole immigration thing. Yes, we were founded on legal immigration, but back then we also needed it more than we do now. We can sustain ourselves and we can be a great country without immigrants. I'm not saying we keep them out. I'm just saying they're not necessary anymore like they were before.
Right. And for anyone that wants to come here because of the freedom of our reputation as being a free nation, that's great. But there are certain conditions that you need to make sure you meet. You are not going to harm the citizens when you come here. There's no ill intent, and the list goes on. So I'm right with you on that. Another thing that you were talking about, which is very interesting, is what military, especially who've seen combat, or even law enforcement or firefighters who have seen very dire situations. When you're going somewhere and there are issues that seem very trivial to get angry over, we still forget a lot of times that our veterans are dealing with issues as well, such as what you mentioned, the loss of lives. There's things that our veterans, our law enforcement, our firefighters have seen, they're currently seeing, and they're facing, and those issues aren't being addressed. And one thing when I met you that I just really was massively impressed with, because of my passion at helping others, especially when it comes to PTSD, you address those, and this is something you have a passion for as well. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, you know, it's I've back in 2009, when General Corelli in the Army Chief of Staff, or Vice Chief of Staff at the time, was really working hard to overcome the stigma of PTSD and trying to get soldiers to get help. And I was a first sergeant at the time, and I was listening to this, and I interviewed General Corelli I used to have a show called Top Talk Radio, which it was me and another first sergeant friend, and we talked about military issues and stuff like that. And so we had General Corelli on, and we were talking about his push to get rid of the stigma. And I really felt like it was a genuine effort. And so I told him right then and there, I says, well, you know, General, I've been dealing with these things for a long time, and I'm going to take you at your word for that. And I'm going to get help because I need it. I was, it was very obvious I needed it, but I was trying to suppress it and trying to self-medicate, not with medication or anything, but just trying to figure out a way to deal with it without actually having help, formal help.
Right. And then,
And
and I want to jump in there real quick, because that is an issue that soldiers and Marines and sailors, law enforcement, this is an issue that they face all the time, is reporting of it because of the stigma and because of the fear that they're going to be expelled, if you will, from from active duty or from being there. They don't want to be labeled as incapable of performing their duties.
Yeah.
And
that's the big part of it. The
yes.
big part of it is you're worried because it's going to affect your career. And I mean, I was a first sergeant, so there's really not much that there's only one more rank higher than that, and I wasn't sure if I aspired to that or not at the time. But what I found is the military really truly was at the time in 2009 trying to overcome that stigma. The problem is there was a mindset in the Army still, because in order for troops to get help, those troops had to be pulled off of their role wherever they were in the company. And that created a strain. Well, the commanders, they can't get replacements because you're still on that line item. And so you're there, you're filling that slot, but you're over here getting help. And so it really was difficult to get the commanders in line because they were more concerned about the mission and not the welfare of the troops necessarily. And it wasn't necessarily their fault, because what was happening is the Army is still continuing to put all of this, and probably the Marines as well. But there's all these things that the Army wants to do. And, you know, there's all these programs that they want to throw in there. And there's all these training briefings and all these things that you've got to do. And it's just more and more and more non-soldierly stuff. And yet soldiers are trying to get help now. And so now what I have found is, while the Army was generally doing a good effort at trying to remove that stigma, what I have learned since coming out about my PTSD is that the general public is not. And I think this is what's killing our troops, is that the general public sees the media narrative about what PTSD is. And to the general public, if you've got PTSD, you're a school shooter waiting to happen. You're a bomber waiting to happen. You're this guy that's going to flip out waiting to happen. And it's amazing how many people have tried to use my PTSD against me, because when I get into a heated debate, the minute I get heated, suddenly it's the PTSD's fault. Oh my gosh, I feel threatened. And, you know, I need to be disarmed because I've got PTSD. And so it's been it's affected me personally, but I don't mind, because I've had soldiers who have contacted me, because I'm always open, and they're in some really bad places.
Yes.
And being able to talk a soldier down from a place where he's going, I'm sorry, I get a little emotional about this, but that life is worth anything that the world can throw at me. And I will gladly take those darts and spears and arrows to protect my brothers and sisters who need it. And that's everybody. I don't care if you're a car crash victim, a rape victim, a police officer who sees death on a daily basis, an EMS worker, or a soldier. Post-traumatic stress disorder it's everywhere, because it's about post-traumatic stress. It's a stressful situation.
Yes.
And something that's life-threatening, or you see the things that you see. So the public is not ready for this. And what we need to do, and I think the military needs to partner with this. They really need to step up to the plate. And quite frankly, even law enforcement departments, because I'll tell you, while the military is doing a great job at dealing with this and handling it with programs, the law enforcement community right now is in the same place where we were prior to 2009. They're still in that place where they can't come out and talk about it because it'll affect their jobs.
Right. I'm with you 100%. And you've really hit on some important issues within the PTSD realm, and that is the misconceptions that are there, as well as the various types of persons who are receivers of PTSD, and that's rape victims, law enforcement, anyone who has undergone a stressful situation. And what's stress to one person isn't necessarily to another. The only problem we have societal wise is certain groups, sects in our society, are being lumped together, like you said, as this person waiting to go off with some horrific ending. That's not the case. The most important thing that we can do is address the issue and get help for those people they're experiencing that, and you have a passion for that, and that's part of something that you do every day. It doesn't have the impact specifically for your election or your candidacy or anything else that's going on. This is what you love. This is part of what you do. And I'm very impressed by that. One of the other things that I'm finding that is really quite fascinating too is your position that is so essential right now, and that is being a conservative and getting in there and dealing with the toxicity of what is happening within government right now. And really, this is something that is very, very much needed. Can you talk to us a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, I've never really aspired to be a politician. I'm still not aspiring to be a politician. I've been going down to the Capitol now in Austin for about three sessions now. So the last 4.5 years, I've been going to Austin to fight for conservative issues, mostly gun rights. But before I got into the gun rights thing, I was down there on veterans issues and trying to take care of veterans and also smaller government stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And what I learned over this time period is just how resistant Austin is to actually standing up and doing something. There's this idea, the general mentality is when it comes to good conservative legislation is, CJ, if it comes to a vote, I'll vote for it. And I say, look, representative or senator so-and-so, I don't want you to wait and vote for something. I want you to put your name on the line, and because it's not going to get up there if you don't author or co-author or co-sponsor this legislation. Put your name on it as a co-sponsor. And the more co-sponsors we get, then this conservative piece of legislation will pass. And we have just such an apathetic legislature that truly wants to do the minimum possible and get away with it. And so this last session, we, in my district, my representative was just so resistant to putting his name on just about anything, unless it was a crony capitalist bill that was supposed to protect one industry over another, a real big government type Republican. And he wouldn't sign on to, I had a bill that all it did was repeal a little section of the transportation code that makes it a crime to walk down the wrong side of the road. That should have been very simple. I don't know who opposes that. Why should the government be telling me what side of the road to walk down? And he wouldn't even sign on to that bill. I had to go and get my state senator to sign on to that bill. So I just got tired of begging for my rights back. I got tired of begging for a so-called conservative to be a conservative. And I thought, well, I can do a crapshoot for hoping that the next guy is just as good, or that maybe this guy will learn his lesson, or I can just jump in there and at the very least force the conversation, even if I'm not elected. But, I'm tired of begging, and I'm tired of being an activist, and I want to go in there and actually do something. I want to get government out of our lives. I want to fight for conservative causes, protect life, get illegal immigrants out of Texas, all those things. Smaller taxes. Actually, I want to get rid of as many taxes as I can, which you can only do if you slash government as much as you can. So I basically want to be an insurgent. I want to be a conservative insurgent in the legislature, a thorn in their side that they have to listen to at least half the time.
I think that this is really important, and you kind of wrapped up what I wanted to say. I really value your time, and I know that you have a lot on your plate. I want to thank you so much for being here. I want to thank you so much for your service. I want to thank you for your dedication to our veterans and to your community. And before I let you go, though, I really want to ask you to share with the viewers the things that you think really need to be said that will allow them to make the right choice at the upcoming election.
This is what I'll tell people. The federal elections, vote. Go out there and vote. But look, I think our federal government is lost. We are at a point now where what we need to do as citizens is we need to strengthen our states, because only the states are going to be able to hold the federal government in check in the end. And so these local elections are extremely important. We
Yes.
don't just need to go out there and vote. You need to find out who's on the ticket. And then don't just read a website or read a card or a mailer, because if you take my mailer and you take the incumbent's mailer and you take the third candidate's mailer, they're all going to say the same thing. And this is what I tell voters when I'm out there knocking on the doors and I hand them my card and I say, look, anybody can put this crap on a piece of paper, but here's my cell phone number. If you have questions, call me, or I'll meet you somewhere. Because if you can look at a guy eye to eye, you can see into his soul, you can see where his heart is,
Yes.
where his spirit lies. And talk to those candidates, especially at the local level. Probably at the state Senate level is where you start to lose a little bit of control over, because your voice gets diluted a bit. But definitely your state representative and below, your mayors, your city councils, your school boards especially. I challenge everyone there, go to one school board meeting, and I guarantee
Mhm.
you'll probably be the only guy there. That's a shame, because those are the schools that are raising our next generation, and we're not doing anything about it. We complain as conservatives about the school system, but go to a school board meeting and you'll see that nobody's there.
Right.
And that's why we're losing it. We have to get involved. And I realize there's so much going on, but what in our life is more important than freedom? Because if we lose that, all those things that we're busy with right now don't mean anything if we're not a free people.
That's exactly right. That is exactly right. And I think you have really hit the nail on the head, things that I've said repeatedly on my show here, as well on Eradicating Program Ignorance, a show that I co-host. I think that the local elections and involvement is essential. I don't think that we really have a right to complain if we're not out there getting involved, if we're not voting, and we're doing our due diligence on finding out who's going to represent us if we don't want to get out there and get in the political arena for ourselves. So I want to thank you so much. I wish you much success on this campaign. I know that you are dedicated. You have spent your life serving, and you're here to continue to do that. And I thank you very much for that.
Yeah. And I took it, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution and defend my country. And now I want to defend my state. And I'll just end with one more thing. This is why I think a lot of good grassroots type people don't run for office. It's ugly. It is nasty when you
Yes.
see how the sausage is made in politics. I mean, believe me, many times I've just wanted to say, I don't want anything to do with this. And so the establishment keeps that's how they keep power, is they try to beat you down and beat you down.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm a little bit harder than that. I've got a hard head, I've got a strong heart, and I've got the Lord behind me. And they're not going to take me down. And at the very least, I'm going to start a conversation that's going to force whoever does win to my side a little bit closer, because as I'm out there fighting over here and he's fighting over there, he's going to have to come a little closer to me in the end. So even if he doesn't get to where I am on conservative issues, I have moved him just by being there. And that's what's important for people when they run for office. It's not about win or lose, although obviously we need good grassroots people to win, but it's about getting that conversation out there, getting your message out, and forcing candidates to move the right way.
Most definitely. And you can't do that if you're not sharing a fresh perspective, because a lot of people get tunnel vision and they are so set on what they have been raised to believe without understanding the bigger picture, because initially they didn't get involved or didn't do their research or whatever the case. And so I'm really impressed with you. And I think that you should give our viewers your website, the information, so that they can get out there and make an educated vote. They need to know where to fill in that dot.
Well, you can go to cjgrisham.com. Very easy website there. And you can email me at cj@cjgrisham.com. And obviously this is the one thing that I hate about campaigning, is that the money thing. And I've always complained about the money, all the money in politics. But I've learned that you don't need a lot of money, but you do need money if you want to get your word out through mailers and things like that. And so even a $5 donation, not even to me, but of course I'd use it. But if there's somebody that you like, everyone can surrender, a Big Mac meal or a big box at Taco Bell or a chai latte or whatever.
Yes.
A $5 bill really goes a long way, because that $5 bill is a yard sign that the candidate can buy. And so that's really what money is for. And I know people are like, oh, all this money in politics. Yeah, the dirty money is bad. But when you've got grassroots people giving 5, 10, 25, I mean, that's what all my donations have been. And here we are now, we're about in a runoff, because I've got all these supporters. It's not a lot of money, but it's a lot of supporters. And so
Right.
that's what you can do. Go to cjgrisham.com. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the social media places. I don't have a Snapchat. So don't look for me on Snapchat, but I do all the hip young stuff.
This is really good. Being involved and being accessible is of extreme importance. You put out your personal cell phone. You are in all the social media. You make yourself available when someone wants to talk to you. I know twice now you've done that for me, and I want to thank you for that. And I know that many people don't realize how important that is when you have someone that's going to be an elected official, is having access to them. That is
And my
essential.
cell phone number is on my website. It's right there.
Yes. So, again, thank you very much. I wish you much success in this and everything that you're doing to help our nation and our local veterans as well. And I know that you would do it nationally if somebody called you from anywhere. So, or even globally for that matter. If we have a soldier that's on the other side of the continent, you're there. So,
Call me.
Yes, yes. And I want to thank each of you for watching. This has been a very informative and candid discussion with a little bit of gentleness, because I've got to tell you, I am really impressed with not only this distinguished Army service
Don't hold that against
soldier.
me.
Yes, I got to tell you, I mean, it's just so impressive, your entire background and everything that you're doing. And for those of you who want to know more, you can go to the TLBTV.com. With this particular show, there's going to be an article that will have all of the information that was on this episode, as well as links to CJ's sites. And you've got to go check out his information and connect with him, because I know that if you aren't personally affected by him, you know somebody that is and may need to get connected as well. So I thank you so much for watching. This has been brought to you by the Liberty Beacon and the TLBTV.com network.